This last week, a week ago last week, I went to Penang Adventist Hospital to conduct a week of prayer. They had sent me an invitation in July. You know, when you get an invitation just a few weeks before an event, it means they tried everybody else and finally gave up and said, let's find somebody who has no invitations. We can get them. So they found me. And I said to Dr. Toe, Dr. Toe, I want to go. He says, you like Indonesia? I said, well, yes, I like Indonesia. I said, however, at the same time, it's good for me to go. It's a blessing to me, and I always learn something. I always enjoy listening to Indonesians speak English. They don't speak English like Malaysians. They speak English like no one else. I went into a shop, and the shopkeeper said, may I help me? And I said, probably. And a lady said to me, do you live? I said, yes. And she said, where? Now, that's a very curious way of getting information, isn't it? And, you know, as in Malaysia, in Malaysia, people like to kind of peek in your shopping bag and say, what did you buy? Or they like to ask you, where are you coming from? Or where are you going? Now, in Indonesia, they'll say, have you had your bath yet? Which I think is just across the line a little bit. And there was a girl I met 2 weeks ago this evening, and she obviously had come from shopping, and I was going to a restaurant to eat my dinner, and she looked at me and she said, dari mana mau ke mana bawa apa? She got all her questions into one sentence. Where have you come from? Where are you going? And what do you have in your bag? They love to speak to strangers. But one of the questions they like to ask is, cari apa? What are you looking for? And I think that's a good question for us this morning. What are we looking for? You know, the Lord teaches us just as any good teacher would. Children, when they learn progressively, don't they? They start with the elementary things, and as they progress, they get into things deeper and deeper, and eventually they're in a doctoral program. We don't start out with children teaching them quantum physics. 1 plus 1 is, the beginning is 1, 2, 3, and it grows from there. And that's the way the Lord deals with us, too. And it's the way He dealt with me that particular week. I went out, as I mentioned, to eat at a little restaurant that boasted of having gado-gado. I like gado-gado. I didn't like their gado-gado. But generally, I like gado-gado. Theirs was too spicy. And I was just sitting there eating like dragons must eat, breathing fire between every bite. And it began to rain, and I didn't have an umbrella. And I was disappointed with myself, and it was raining very, very hard. And I said to the waitress, would you bring me a little plastic bag? She said, to put over your head? I said, no. I said, to put all my earthly possessions in so they don't get wet when I go out in the rain. And she looked at me and realized I didn't need a very big bag and brought me a little tiny one, and I put my phone and some money in it, and I went out in the rain. It was pouring down rain, and a beca came by. I've decided to call the becas in Medan Beamers, the name they have in the States for BMWs, because it's a beca and a motorcycle, Beamer. And they're all motorcycle driven, so you can get around quickly. And this particular beamer came by, and I flagged him down, and he had on a nice raincoat. He was more prepared for the rain than I was. And I said, I want to go to such and such a hotel. And he said, 100. Now, in Indonesia, you know, the language is not easy when you talk money, because the money has to be so big to be just a little. And I said, 100. He said, yes, 100. Now, if he's talking 100, that's, I think it's less than a penny. And I said, I'm sorry, tidak ada uang kecil, I have no small money. He said, no, 100,000. And all of a sudden, it was 100,000. And I said, what route were you going to take? Through Jakarta? That's very expensive. And he just drove off in the rain. So I thought I'd rather walk in the rain than ride in his beamer. And then something happened that changed my life. A young fella came by on his motorcycle, beca, and he didn't have a raincoat. And he was so wet. There was never a fish as wet as he was. You know, a fish is wet, but he was wet and then had wet clothes on too. So he was wetter than a fish. And he stopped, and I said, I want to go to this hotel. And he said, 25. And I thought, here we go again. I don't know if he means 250,000. I don't know if he means 2.5 million. I don't know what he means. And I said, 25, berapa? And he said, 25,000. A fourth of the previous driver. And I said, tidak mau. He said, kenapa? I said, too cheap. I'll give you 50. He said, okay. He was so nice. He was careful not to go over the speed bumps. You know, he looked at me and realized the speed bump could break something with this guy. And he was very, very careful and driving carefully. And when we got to the hotel, he said, here's my phone number. If you ever want to ride, send me a text message. And I said, well, I want to ride tomorrow morning to Medan Adventist Hospital at 7 o'clock. He said, I'll be here. And in the morning, I looked out of my hotel window down 8 floors, and there he was, waiting, long before the appointed time. And he took me to the hospital, and I said, how much? He said, whatever you want to pay. Oh, that's dangerous. And every day he took me. He told me his name was Alung. I said, are you 15 or 16? He said, I'm 29, and I have a wife and 2 children. We got to know each other. Monday, as we were coming back, we went down a street called Pandu Baru. Now, I'm told that Pandu here means driver, and in some cases, pilot. In Indonesia, it means many, many things. A scout, directions. And we were driving down Pandu Baru on Monday, and there we passed a mountain of garbage that smelled like a mountain of garbage. And in Indonesia, these mountains of garbage have people digging in them. And there was a woman who was, you know how we put our trash, our kitchen trash and our bathroom trash and all our trash in little plastic bags and tie them up and throw them in the dumpster. And here was a woman out there untying these bags in the heat and emptying them out. And I said, Alung, stop. And we stopped, and she took those bags over and stood in they call them a got, but it was a sewer running by, and washed them out. And I said, Alung, when I buy something in the market, when I buy a tomato in the market, and the bag is wrinkled, did it come from here? And he said, And I said, And I decided I will always carry my own bag to the market. He said, let's go. I don't want to watch anymore. I said, neither do I. And we left. But every day we had to go by there. And every day she was there. And one day I said, stop, I want to talk to this lady. And I said to her, how many children do you have? And she said, one little boy, but I have no husband. So she said, I do this work to raise my son. Were you tempted this week to complain about your job? Don't be. I don't think any of us have such a job as the lady on Pandu Baru had. On Tuesday, I said to Alung, because he had told me he had a wife and 2 children, I said, you know, there are so many vegetarian restaurants in Medan. Oh, there are so many. You walk 5 blocks and you see 4 vegetarian restaurants. I said, I want to take you and your wife and children out to eat tonight. He said, okay. I said, let's meet at 6 o'clock at such and such a restaurant. He said, all right. I got there and they were waiting. And the wife said to me, is this halal? I said, it's the most halal you have ever eaten in your whole life. I said, it's more halal than halal. There's nothing in this place that's haram at all. Nothing ever died and went in there. And we went in and we had such a nice time. And his wife was a beautiful woman and his mother was so nice and they were so gracious and we ate together. It was like going out with friends from church. As the week progressed, one day I decided to have lunch at a different restaurant, and I went there and I ordered fried rice, and it was some of the worst fried rice I had ever eaten in my life. Now, I feel like I must say these things about Indonesian food today, because last time I said it was better than Malaysian food, and my wife said, you can't say that in Penang. So we're adjusting the scales, and the balance is going back where it belongs. Oh, it was bad fried rice. And I wanted to just leave it. And I thought, no, I paid for it. I'm not going to leave it. So I said, I want this to go. And they said, you've barely touched it. I said, I need to leave, and I want to take it with me. And I thought, I'll find some homeless person and give it to them. And before long, I'd seen someone, because there are so many. And I said, you want some fried rice? And the old lady said, yes, yes, yes. And I gave it to her. And I was very proud of myself. When Jesus fed the 5,000, he said to Andrew, who had found the boy with the fish, and who said, what are these 5 fish with so many people? What are these with so many? And Jesus said, give ye them to eat. In other words, it's enough. You don't have to do the increase. All you have to do is pass it out. It's enough. And even though it's not my office or endeavor, I was thinking about the food bank at this church. The food is enough, isn't it? The food is enough. No matter how much food, it's enough. No matter how many hungry persons there are, it's enough. But we need to pass it out. It's enough. And there's such a great work to do. In the United States, students at our schools have a little thing they like to do where they say, this week, I saw Jesus. And maybe they'll say, I saw Jesus in Mrs. Johnson when she was so nice to me about my bad grade. I saw Jesus. Or they'll say, I saw Jesus in my roommate who remembered my birthday. And so often we see Jesus in the people who help us. Can we see Jesus when we help other people? John 12:21, our scripture said that they came to Philip and desired him, saying, Sir, we want to see Jesus. And he said the same to Andrew. He passed the message on to Andrew. They want to see Jesus. This morning, I want us to think about seeing Jesus. Do we want to see Jesus? Cari apa? What are we looking for? when we look for Jesus. I wanted to see Jesus in Medan, and I did, but it took me a week of classes before I saw him. On Friday, they had already come and cleaned my room, and I was packing. And I had bought some things, and they were, of course, in plastic bags that were not wrinkled. I made sure I didn't get any wrinkled plastic bags. And I was putting all these bags in one bag to throw away, and I had put them in the trash. And on Sabbath morning, when I was getting ready to go to Sabbath school, I looked at all those bags in the trash, and I thought, this is wonderful. Maybe the lady on Pandu Baru gets the trash from this hotel, and she can find these bags. Haven't I done something nice to put my plastic bags in the trash for her? But then, when I was ready to go to Sabbath school, I thought about those plastic bags, and I thought, is it nice to give people things by way of the trash? What if I said to you, you know, I got you some fruit. It's in the trash in the men's room. You can go find it. You'd be insulted. And yet I thought, I hope this woman can find the trash that I threw away because I want to give her something. But I'd been acting like that all week. I'd taken food that I didn't like and given it to a woman on the street. I didn't give her my favorite. I gave her something I didn't like. You know, for us to be kind and generous, sometimes the Lord has to push us, doesn't he? I may have told you before, I don't know, I tend to repeat myself. When our son Jeffrey got married in Indonesia, the wedding was a success. They were married. But the reception was somewhat of a failure. They forgot to serve the wedding cake. And it was a big cake. And nobody realized it until the guests had left, and there stood this cake staring at an empty room. And my wife said, what a pity to leave it here. I said, we're not leaving it here, we're taking it to the hotel. She said, what are we going to do with a 25-pound cake at the hotel? I said, we'll be up late eating. Well, there was lots of food left over, actually, and when we got to the hotel, we said to different wedding guests who were staying at the hotel, let's go give this to street people tonight. And so we divided it up into little unwrinkled plastic bags, and we started down the street, and we were passing out rice and passing out some gluten satay, and we were passing out different things, and wedding cake. When we ran out, we started back, and we discovered that people often get rice. Often they get an egg. Often they get protein, some tofu or some tempeh, but they never get wedding cake. And they were dancing in the streets. The hungry were laughing and jumping around. Because we had been good? No, because we had forgotten. Because we'd been so caught up with everything else, we hadn't served the cake. One of the wedding guests said, I have seen a parable of Jesus acted out. The halt and the lame and the blind were invited to the feast. And they enjoy coming, don't they? I wanted to see Jesus in Medan. And it was Sabbath morning that I realized I can't see Jesus by giving things to people by way of the trash, by giving away the things I don't want. Because you see, Jesus says, inasmuch as you've done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. Giving something to Jesus in the trash. Giving something to Jesus that I don't want. So we stopped on the way. I said to Alung, on the way to the hospital, go by Pandu Baru. And I came with a big bag full of plastic bags. And she was there emptying plastic bags of rotten trash, getting ready to step into the sewer. And I got out of the becha wearing a suit coat. And I said, can you use these? Oh, she said, they're wonderful. Did you ever look at a bag full of used plastic bags and think, oh, they're wonderful? When I got to church, the chaplain of the hospital said, don't you have your phone? I called you 4 times. I couldn't find you. I thought you weren't coming. Where were you? I said, I was on the way and I stopped to see Jesus. Have you seen Jesus this week? Maybe sleeping in front of a store? Maybe partially clothed? Maybe someone who's been beat up? Jesus himself, when he went to the synagogue and began his ministry, in Luke 4:18, got up to read, and he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised. You see, the students in the U.S., when they say, I saw Jesus this week, they have it all wrong. Because they say, I saw Jesus because someone treated me nicely. But when we see Jesus, it's when we see people who need us to treat them nicely. Isaiah 58:7-10 says, speaking of the fast that he has chosen for us, is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest the naked, that you cover him, then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thy health shall spring forth speedily. Alung, the becha driver, said to me, my wife came to Medan. I ate something wrong at the potluck last Sabbath. I don't mean I put it in my ear. I mean it was the wrong thing to eat. I don't mean I was eating it the wrong way. And I got very, very sick Saturday night. And my body was more clever than I was. And it shut down, and it wouldn't let things out of my stomach except to return from whence it came. And it was saying, thus far and no farther. And everything was coming back. And I was so sick, and I was supposed to leave early Sunday morning, and I called my wife, and I says, I can't come home, I'm sick. She says, let me know when you can get a flight. And I called her Monday morning, and I said, I still can't get out of bed. Do you know who came to see me and who brought me medicine? The becha driver, Alung. He came to see me on Sunday, and he said, I think you need some charcoal tablets. Norit. He said, that's what I use. And when my wife came, and Monday I said, you know, if you ever want to see me again, you better come here and say goodbye. It's just about over. There's not much of me left. And she said, I'll be there this evening. And she came, and Alung, I told Alung, my wife is coming. He said, oh, I hope you're well enough for your wife to come and visit my house. He said, oh, we have such a wonderful house. He said, it's very rame. It's such an exciting place. He said, there are 12 of us who live there. I said, oh, I'll bet it is an exciting place. And we went there. It's the first time in 40 years I have been in the home of a beca driver. It's the first time in my life. And they rolled out the red carpet. It was a red mat. They rolled out on the floor. They had no furniture. And we sat on the floor. And they took from their very small income. And they went and bought things that we might like to eat. I said, oh, Alung, I've been sick and I can't eat anything. He said, yes, so instead of boiling water, we went and bought water for you. I gave people the food I didn't like. They prepared the best. I wanted to give my gift to Jesus in the trash. In the book Testimonies, Volume 5, it says to help the poor is to help Jesus Christ. When we see the poor, we have seen Jesus. And then it says, can you give up a luxury for the poor? And then it says, yea, or what about a comfort? Are you willing to give up something comfortable for the poor? Are you willing to give up a Sunday afternoon for the poor? Are you willing to help with the food bank so that Jesus can eat? It's for Jesus. And he says, when you have done it to any of these, you have done it to me. Jesus is hungry. When the message was sent to Jesus and asked, are you the one we should be looking for, or is he still to come? And he answered and said, the blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have had the gospel preached to them. This was the work of Jesus Christ. In Testimonies, Volume 5, she says, give up something comfortable for the poor. Set money aside on a regular basis for the poor, to help the poor when you see them. You know, our help for the poor is usually impulse giving. But she says, plan ahead. And then, it's interesting, the instructions are, set up your own personal fund. This is not to be shifted to the organization. Is this works? The terms are used that when we help the poor, we have credit in the ledger of heaven. Is that works? Actually, it's an eradication of the selfishness that is within all of us. Remember, Jesus said, the poor you will have with you always. And the reason that the poor are allowed, Jesus could have made us all, God could have made us all rich, couldn't he? We could have all had enough. There didn't need to be people living in hovels. But this has been allowed by God in order that we can have an unselfish development. It's for us that there are poor people, so that we can learn to share the blessings that God has given us. And we go back again to the chapter in Luke that Dr. O preached about. The steward who had spent everything on himself, and finally, when he's caught, because he hasn't been a steward must spend the money on those that he's supposed to spend it on. It was for his master. And the food bank is for the master. And when the steward was caught, he began to share with others. Our work is to share with others. And the reason there are poor people in Penang, the reason there are poor people all around the world, is to teach us not to be selfish. If Judas had ministered to the poor, he could have developed an unselfish spirit. And so can we. Jesus became poor for us. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who even though he was God, took on himself the form of a servant. How many of us would want to take on ourselves the form of a servant? And so now I want to shift gears just a little bit. He became poor for us, and he also became sin for us. When we see the poor, we see Jesus Christ. He was, it says in Luke 53, verse 3, he was numbered with the transgressors. He hung on a cross between two thieves, and he was considered sin, a lawbreaker. He took that upon himself. He took our sin. He took my sin and yours. He bore the shame and the sin and the guilt for us. Now, let me ask you something. When you see someone, and I grappled with this week, trying to put my mind around this idea. And last night I asked Dr. Ronald Coe about it. And he said to me, yes, in certain ways, and it's like this, and he helped me to see it. Very wise man. Jesus, I asked him, when we see a sinner, when we see the poor, we see Jesus. Because he says, if you've done it to them, you've done it to me. When we see a sinner, do we see Jesus? Now that's tough, isn't it? What are we saying about Jesus when we say, I saw a sinner and it reminded me of Jesus? And his response to me was, when that sinner is covered by the blood of Jesus Christ, when they're covered by Jesus Christ, yes, we see Jesus. Because when the Father looks at the sinner, when the Father looks at me, he sees Jesus covering me, doesn't he? There's a song in the hymnal, covered with his life, whiter than snow, fullness of his life, then shall I know. My life of scarlet, my sin and woe, cover with his life, whiter than snow. And so if God sees Jesus when he looks at me, shouldn't I see Jesus when I look at someone who has sinned and fallen? Isn't that who I should see? When I look at someone who's made a mess of their lives and who's repented and who's so sorry for what they've done, shouldn't I see Jesus and his forgiveness when I look at them? Or should I see their sin? When I look at the poor, I should see Jesus. And when I look at the fallen, I should see Jesus who lifts them up. So it's not just about being hungry. It's also about being forgiven. Psalm 69:20. It's a verse that is spoken by David and quoted by Jesus when he was talking about his suffering. And it says, reproach has broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness. And I looked for some to take pity, but there was none. And for comforters, but I found none. Jesus found no comfort. Jesus found no supporters when he bore our sins. And those around us who have fallen must find comfort and support in us. Because when we look at them, we should have the eye of faith that sees forgiveness and the covering of Jesus Christ over them. There's a beautiful old hymn that says, "You will see your Lord a-comin', you will see your Lord a-comin', you will see your Lord a-comin' in a few more days. Then the heavenly, heavenly music," yes, the heavenly, heavenly music, oh, the heavenly, heavenly music will come floating through the air. It was an old Advent hymn. And I thought, oh, we can't sing that today. They're tired of me singing songs they don't know in church. We won't sing it. But I told you the words. "And I saw my Lord a-coming last Sabbath morning on the way to church, standing in the sewer, rinsing out plastic bags. And all the way to church, there was heavenly, heavenly music floating through the air." Not only when we feed the hungry, not only when we care for the people who are destitute or naked or in prison, but when we forgive, there's heavenly music floating through the air. Because this is to see Jesus.